Power meant everything in Oak Haven. For Deputy Vance Keller, that shiny silver badge was a blank check to do whatever he pleased, especially to those he saw as helpless. When he zeroed in on a quiet 17-year-old boy quietly studying in a local diner, he figured it was just another ordinary day. He figured it was just another kid he could humiliate for a cheap, ego-boosting power trip. He had no idea the boy's father was an active, high-ranking FBI special agent with zero tolerance for dirty cops. What began as a cruel display of small-town authority quickly spiraled into a catastrophic reckoning. Rosie's Diner sat on the edge of Oak Haven, a small, insular Georgia town where the tea was sweet, but the hospitality came with heavy conditions. The diner smelled perpetually of scorched coffee, bacon, grease, and old vinyl. It was the kind of place where locals gossiped over easy eggs, while outsiders were watched with silent, calculating stares. 17-year-old Jalen Reed sat in a corner booth, completely unaware of Oak Haven's unwritten rules. He was simply passing through, spending the week with his aunt on the outskirts of the county. Spread across the cracked Formica table were his Advanced Placement United States History textbook, a scattering of flashcards, and a half-eaten plate of fries. Jalen was a track star with a meticulously maintained 3.9 GPA, a kid whose biggest worry right now was landing a recommendation letter for Georgetown University. He wore a simple gray hoodie with headphones resting around his neck, quietly minding his own business as he highlighted a passage about the Civil Rights Act. The bell above the diner door jingled, announcing the arrival of Oak Haven's finest. Deputy Vance Keller swaggered in, accompanied by his rookie partner, Deputy Riley Vaughn. Keller was built like a cinder block, with a tight buzz cut and a perpetually smug expression that suggested he was always in on a joke no one else understood. He had a reputation in the county, the kind of cop who wrote tickets for going 2 miles over the speed limit if he didn't like your bumper sticker, and the kind who made people empty their pockets just for walking on the wrong side of the street. Marlene, the head waitress who had worked at Rosie's for 2 decades, immediately tensed. She reached for a fresh pot of coffee, her eyes darting nervously toward the deputies. "Morning, Vance. Usual?" she asked, her voice tight. Keller didn't answer right away. His pale blue eyes scanned the room, skipping over the familiar faces of local mechanics and retirees, before locking onto Jalen in the back booth. A slow, unpleasant smile spread across his face. He adjusted his utility belt, the leather creaking loudly in the suddenly quiet diner. "Hold that thought, Marlene," he drawled, his southern accent thick and deliberate. "Looks like we got some loitering going on." He bypassed the empty stools at the counter and walked straight toward Jalen's booth. Deputy Vaughn, looking slightly uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge his senior partner, trailed behind. Jalen, absorbed in his reading, didn't notice the approaching shadows until Keller slammed a heavy, meaty hand down on the open history book, crumpling the pages. Jalen jumped, his head snapping up. "Excuse me? You deaf, boy?" Keller asked, leaning in close enough that Jalen could smell stale tobacco and peppermint gum. "I asked what you're doing here. You been sitting in this booth, nursing a plate of cold fries? This ain't a public library." Jalen blinked, trying to process the sudden hostility. I'm just studying. I bought food." "I don't care what you bought," Keller snapped, his voice rising so that every ear in the diner turned toward them. "Let me see some ID." Jalen felt a cold spike of adrenaline. His father had given him the talk years ago, drilling into him exactly how to behave in situations like this. Keep your hands visible. Speak clearly. Do not argue. My wallet is in my front right pocket, Jalen said evenly, though his heart hammered against his ribs. I'm going to reach for it now. Just get it, Keller barked. Jalen slowly extracted his wallet and handed over his Georgia driver's license. Keller snatched it, scrutinizing the plastic as if hunting for a counterfeit flaw. Atlanta address, he read aloud, practically spitting the city's name. Figures. What brings a city kid all the way out to Oak Haven looking for trouble? I'm visiting my aunt Lena Jenkins, Jalen replied respectfully. She lives off County Road 9. Keller scoffed. Yeah, I know her. Doesn't explain why you're taking up space in a local business. We have a loitering ordinance in this town. Marlene, unable to watch the blatant harassment any longer, stepped out from behind the counter. Vance, come on now. The boy ain't bothering nobody. He paid for his meal and left a nice tip. Leave him be. Keller shot her a venomous glare that froze her in place. Back to your coffee pots, Marlene. Unless you want a citation for interfering with an official investigation. Marlene swallowed hard, clutching her order pad, and stepped back, her eyes filled with helpless apology directed at Jalen. Keller turned his attention back to the teenager. The complete lack of fear or subservience in Jalen's eyes seemed to enrage him. He wanted the kid to cower. He wanted the trembling obedience he usually commanded. Stand up, Keller ordered. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong, Jalen stated, keeping his voice steady and remembering his father's advice to verbally establish innocence. I said, stand the hell up, Keller roared. Without waiting, he reached across the table, grabbed a handful of Jalen's hoodie, and yanked him out of the booth. Fries scattered across the floor. Jalen stumbled, his shin cracking hard against the edge of the heavy wooden table, but he caught his balance before hitting the ground. Deputy Vaughn instinctively put a hand on his taser, though Jalen made no aggressive moves. Hands on the table, spread them, Keller commanded, kicking Jalen's feet farther apart. He aggressively patted the teenager down, finding nothing but a cell phone and a set of car keys. Finding no contraband only seemed to make Keller angrier. He grabbed Jalen by the back of the neck, his grip painfully tight. Here's how it works, city boy, Keller hissed into Jalen's ear. I don't like your attitude. I don't like your look. And I definitely don't like outsiders coming into my town and acting smart. You're going to pack up your little books. You're going to get in whatever rusted out junker you drove here in, and you're going to drive straight back to Atlanta. If I see your face in Oak Haven city limits again, I'm locking you up for vagrancy. Do you understand me? Jalen's jaw clenched. The injustice burned in his throat, but survival instincts and his father's training won out. I understand, he rasped. Keller shoved him forward. Then get to packing. Humiliated with the entire diner watching in dead silence, Jalen gathered his textbooks and flashcards with shaking hands. He stuffed them into his backpack, slung it over his shoulder, and walked toward the door. As he passed, Keller let out a low, mocking chuckle. Have a safe drive, boy. Jalen pushed through the glass doors. The bell jingled cheerfully, a stark contrast to the burning humiliation and anger settling deep in his chest. He walked to his modest sedan, got in, and locked the doors. He didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, his trembling hands reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed the number he knew by heart. 300 miles away, in the austere glass-walled confines of the FBI field office in Atlanta, Special Agent Donovan Reed was reviewing a dense file on interstate racketeering. Donovan was a man who commanded a room simply by existing in it. At 48, he possessed a sharp analytical mind and a physical presence built from 2 decades of field work. He was meticulous, deeply principled, and notoriously ruthless when it came to corruption under color of law. His desk phone remained silent, but his personal cell vibrated against the mahogany surface. Seeing Jalen's face on the caller ID, a rare, soft smile touched his lips. He picked it up. "Hey, Jay. Shouldn't you be buried in history notes right now?" The smile vanished instantly. In his 20 years with the Bureau, Donovan had learned to read voice tones like a polygraph. The tremor, the breathlessness, the suppressed anger. It was the sound of a victim in the immediate aftermath of an assault. Donovan sat up straight, his posture rigid. "Jalen, what happened? Are you hurt? Where are you?" "I'm okay. I'm not hurt," Jalen said quickly, though his voice cracked. "I'm in my car outside a diner in Oak Haven. Dad, a cop just threw me out." Donovan's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping into a calm, icy register that his colleagues knew meant extreme danger. "Walk me through it exactly as it happened. Don't leave out a single detail." Jalen recounted every moment. Deputy Keller's approach, the aggressive questioning, the unprovoked physical contact, the illegal search, and the threat of false arrest. He described the badge, the nameplate, Keller, and the silence of the partner. With every word, the temperature in Donovan's office seemed to plummet. He didn't interrupt. He listened, his mind categorizing the violations. Title 18, USC, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, assault, battery, unlawful detention. "Did he issue a citation or a warning on paper?" Donovan asked softly. "No, he just shoved me and told me to get out of town, or he'd lock me up for vagrancy." "Listen to me very carefully, Jalen," Donovan said, his voice a steady anchor. "You did perfectly. You survived the encounter. You stayed calm and you didn't escalate. I am incredibly proud of you. Now I want you to drive straight to your Aunt Lena's house. Do not speed. Obey every traffic law. Park your car in the garage, lock the doors, and stay inside. I am coming to get you." "Dad, you don't have to drive all the way down here." "I am coming," Donovan repeated, a tone of absolute finality in his voice. "I love you. Call me the second you pull into her driveway." Donovan hung up the phone. He sat in silence for exactly 10 seconds, letting the cold fury settle into absolute, razor-sharp focus. Nobody touched his son. Nobody abused a badge to terrorize a child. He didn't just storm out of the office. He went to his computer, accessing the National Crime Information Center, and restricted interagency databases. Donovan ran a preliminary check on the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department and Deputy Vance Keller. What he found in mere minutes painted a grim picture. Oak Haven wasn't just a sleepy town, it was a jurisdictional black hole. There were multiple civil lawsuits settled out of court regarding excessive force, disproportionate arrest rates for minorities traveling through the county limits, and complaints of asset forfeiture that bordered on highway robbery. Sheriff Raymond Collier had been running the department like a personal fiefdom for years. Deputy Vance Keller had 3 excessive force complaints buried in his internal file, all dismissed by the sheriff. Donovan printed the files. He grabbed his suit jacket, his credentials, and his bureau-issued Glock 19. Walking past the bullpen, he stopped by the desk of Agent Travis Klein, a cybercrime specialist and a trusted friend. "Travis," Donovan said, his voice flat, "I need a favor. Start pulling the public and restricted financial records for the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department. Grants, budget allocations, asset forfeiture logs." Travis looked up, noting the dangerous set of Donovan's jaw. "Oak Haven. What's going on, Don?" "Local deputy just put his hands on Jalen without cause." Travis's eyes widened. "Give me an hour. I'll have their financial history turned inside out." Donovan nodded and turned toward the elevator. The drive from Atlanta to Oak Haven felt like a tactical deployment. The concrete arteries of the city gradually gave way to pine-lined state highways, then to the winding, poorly paved county roads of Oak Haven. The scenery was deceptively peaceful, but Donovan saw it through the lens of a federal investigator entering hostile territory. He bypassed Aunt Lena's house entirely for now. Jalen had texted that he was safe indoors. Donovan's first stop was the epicenter of the rot. The Oak Haven Sheriff's Department was a brick building that looked more like a fortress than a public service office. 4 squad cars were parked diagonally across the front, taking up multiple spaces. Donovan pulled his sleek black government-issued Tahoe into a spot reserved for the sheriff, threw the vehicle into park, and stepped out. He buttoned his suit jacket, adjusting the lapel so the slight bulge of his shoulder holster was just visible enough to a trained eye. He walked through the double glass doors with a purposeful, unhurried stride. The front reception area was dingy, manned by a bored-looking dispatcher filing her nails behind a thick pane of bulletproof glass. "Can I help you?" she asked, barely looking up. Donovan didn't smile. He reached into his breast pocket, retrieved his leather credential case, and flipped it open, pressing the gold FBI shield and his photo ID flat against the glass. "Special Agent Donovan Reed, Federal Bureau of Investigation," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of the entire Department of Justice. "I'm here to see Sheriff Collier and Deputy Vance Keller. Now." The dispatcher's nail file paused. Her eyes darted from the gold shield to Donovan's unyielding stare. The casual arrogance of the Oak Haven precinct evaporated in an instant, replaced by the sudden chilling realization that the outside world had just kicked down their door. Her manicured fingers froze over her keyboard. The color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the lobby. She fumbled for the heavy black receiver of her desk phone, her eyes never leaving the gold shield pressed against the reinforced glass. "Sheriff," she whispered into the phone, her voice trembling. "There's an FBI agent here. He says he needs to see you and Deputy Keller right now." A distorted, irritated squawk came through the receiver, followed by a heavy sigh. "Send him back to my office, Darlene." The heavy magnetic lock on the inner door clicked open with a loud metallic clack. Special Agent Donovan Reed pushed through, stepping into the belly of the beast. The bullpen of the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department was a relic of the late 90s. Wood-paneled walls, overflowing filing cabinets, and the lingering scent of stale coffee and chewing tobacco. A few deputies looked up from their paperwork, their expressions shifting from lazy curiosity to sudden guarded tension as they took in Donovan's tailored suit and uncompromising demeanor. He didn't spare them a glance. He walked straight toward the frosted glass door at the back, stenciled with Sheriff Raymond Collier. Donovan opened the door without knocking. Sheriff Collier was a man who looked exactly like the town he governed, stuck in the past and resting on unearned authority. He was a large man, his belly straining against the buttons of his tan uniform shirt. A half-chewed cigar resting in a heavy glass ashtray on his cluttered desk. He offered a practiced politician's smile that didn't quite reach his shrewd, heavy-lidded eyes. "Agent Reed, is it?" Collier rumbled, leaning back in his leather chair and making no move to stand or offer a hand. "Welcome to Oak Haven. What can the local boys do for the Bureau on this fine afternoon? We usually get a heads up when the feds cross into our jurisdiction." "This isn't a courtesy call, Sheriff," Donovan said. He didn't take the seat across from the desk. He stood, forcing Collier to look up at him. "I'm here regarding an incident that occurred at Rosie's Diner involving your deputy Vance Keller." Collier's fake smile faltered by a fraction of an inch. He picked up a pen and tapped it thoughtfully against his desk pad. "Rosie's? Keller was just on routine patrol. I haven't seen a report of any incident. Did we catch a federal fugitive getting a slice of cherry pie?" "He assaulted, illegally detained, and threatened a 17-year-old boy," Donovan stated, his voice dangerously level. "A boy who was doing nothing but studying for an AP history exam. A boy who had broken no laws, violated no ordinances, and posed zero threat." Collier sighed, dropping the pen. The good old boy facade began to slip, revealing the arrogant local warlord underneath. "Look, Agent Reed, I don't know who called you down here, but sometimes my deputies have to be proactive. We get a lot of transient traffic off the interstate. Sometimes you gotta rattle the cage a little to keep the riffraff moving along. If Keller was a little gruff with some city kid, I'll have a word with him. But bringing the FBI down here seems like an overreaction. Don't you think?" "The kid," Donovan said, leaning over the desk and planting his knuckles on the scratched mahogany, "is Jalen Reed, my son." The silence that followed was absolute. The ticking of the cheap wall clock suddenly sounded like a sledgehammer. Collier's jaw went slack, his eyes widening as the catastrophic reality of the situation crashed down on him. The pen rolled off the desk and hit the floor with a hollow tap. Your son," Collier stammered, the color completely washing out of his face. "Bring Deputy Keller in here," Donovan commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order from an apex predator. Right now. Collier scrambled for his desk phone, his hands shaking. "Darlene, get Keller in my office immediately." 2 minutes later, the door swung open. Deputy Vance Keller swaggered in, but his confident stride hitched when he saw the man in the federal suit standing over his boss. Keller looked at Collier, seeking his usual backup, but the sheriff looked like a man who had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. "You wanted to see me, boss?" Keller asked, his voice lacking its usual bite. Donovan turned slowly. He looked Keller up and down, his eyes coldly dissecting the man who had laid hands on his child. "Deputy Vance Keller, badge number 442. Keller puffed out his chest instinctively. "Who's asking?" "Special Agent Donovan Reed, FBI. I am Jalen Reed's father." Keller actually took a physical step backward, stumbling slightly against the doorframe. The smug, untouchable aura he carried in the diner shattered into a million pieces. His mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. I didn't... He was loitering. He was acting suspicious." "He was reading a textbook," Donovan said, stepping toward Keller. Keller flinched. He provided identification. He was compliant. And in response, you put your hands on him, dragged him out of a booth, subjected him to an illegal search, and threatened him with false arrest under color of law. That is a direct violation of Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Now hold on a damn minute, Keller panicked, looking frantically at Collier. Sheriff, you're going to let this guy come in here and threaten me? The kid was giving me lip. Shut up, Vance, Collier hissed, his voice tight with panic. Just shut your mouth. I am not threatening you, Deputy, Donovan said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. I am making you a promise. I am opening a preliminary civil rights investigation. I will subpoena the body cam footage of every deputy in this department. I will pull the dash cam logs. I will interview every patron in that diner. And when I prove that you violated my son's constitutional rights, I will see you stripped of that badge. And I will personally ensure you are prosecuted to the absolute, fullest extent of federal law. Keller was hyperventilating now, the reality of federal prison suddenly looming over his small-town kingdom. Sheriff, he can't do this. Donovan ignored him, turning back to Collier. Preserve all communications, dispatch logs, and footage from today. If a single bit of data goes missing, I will charge you with obstruction of justice and destruction of evidence. I'll be back, Sheriff. And I won't be alone. Donovan walked out of the office, leaving the door wide open. As he strode through the bullpen, the silence was deafening. Every deputy knew that a storm had just made landfall in Oak Haven, and there was nowhere to hide. Donovan pulled his Tahoe into the gravel driveway of a modest blue-shuttered house on County Road 9. Aunt Lena was already standing on the porch, her arms crossed tight against the evening chill, a deep frown etched into her usually warm face. The moment Donovan stepped out of the vehicle, the front door flew open and Jalen ran out. Donovan caught his son in a tight embrace, burying his face in Jalen's shoulder. For a fleeting second, the hardened federal agent melted away, leaving only a terrified, fiercely protective father. He squeezed Jalen, feeling the solid, unharmed reality of him. I'm okay, Dad, Jalen mumbled against his father's jacket. I'm okay. Donovan pulled back, gripping Jalen's shoulders, his eyes scanning the boy's face for any hidden bruises. Are you sure? Your leg? You mentioned you hit it on the table. Just a scrape, it's nothing. Lena walked down the steps, shaking her head. Donovan, I've lived in this county for years. I know how those deputies operate. But bringing it to my doorstep, touching my nephew. Her voice trembled with suppressed rage. It ends today, Lena, Donovan promised, his voice hard. I've already paid Sheriff Collier a visit. What did he say? Jalen asked, his eyes wide. He lied. Keller lied. Exactly as expected, Donovan said, guiding them both back into the house. But here's the thing about liars who wear badges. They get sloppy. They think the badge is a shield. They forget it's also a magnifying glass. Donovan set up a temporary command post on Aunt Lena's dining room table. He opened his encrypted laptop and immediately connected to the secure FBI internet. A video call pinged. It was Agent Travis Klein sitting in the fluorescent-lit bullpen back in Atlanta, looking like a man who had just struck a vein of pure gold. Don, Travis said, skipping the pleasantries. You were right to have me dig into the financials. Oak Haven isn't just a jurisdiction with a few bad apples. It's a goddamn criminal enterprise. Donovan leaned in. Talk to me. I started pulling their asset forfeiture logs. Look at the spikes, specifically on Interstate 85 and State Route 41. They call it highway interdiction, but it's highway robbery. They are pulling over out-of-state plates, specifically targeting minorities and younger drivers under the guise of minor traffic infractions. Swerving, expired tags, broken taillights that miraculously fix themselves later. Jalen, standing behind his father, stared at the screen. Wait, they just take people's stuff? If you're carrying a large amount of cash, yes, Travis said grimly. They claim the cash is suspected drug money. The burden of proof in civil asset forfeiture is notoriously low. They seize the cash, tell the driver they can fight it in court, which costs more in lawyer fees than the money seized, so the victims just walk away. The department absorbs the funds. Donovan's eyes narrowed as he scanned the numbers. Millions! They've seized millions! Where's the money going, Travis? That's the twist, Travis said, a savage grin spreading across his face. By state law, that money is supposed to go to department equipment, training, or community programs. But I traced the department's discretionary spending. Sheriff Collier bought 2 Bearcat armored vehicles they don't need. Sure, but he also approved massive consulting fees to a shell company registered in Delaware, a company owned by his brother-in-law. Donovan let out a slow breath. The puzzle pieces were slamming together. Embezzlement, money laundering, wire fraud. Exactly, Travis confirmed. And Keller, he's their top earner. The guy brings in more seized cash than the rest of the department combined. Collier protects him because Keller funds Collier's retirement plan. Keller thought Jalen was a target of opportunity, an out-of-town kid he could shake down or intimidate just for kicks. Maybe see if he had cash in the car. He picked the wrong car, Donovan said softly. I've already forwarded the preliminary findings to Lauren Whitaker at the DOJ Civil Rights Division, Travis added. She's practically frothing at the mouth. We're talking RICO charges. We can dismantle the entire department. Donovan closed his eyes for a moment, the strategy forming perfectly in his mind. The bullying of his son was the catalyst, the arrogant misstep that had finally exposed a massive, rotting structure of corruption. We need a local witness, Donovan said, his eyes snapping open. Someone who sees how they operate day to day. Jalen, the waitress at the diner. You said she tried to stop him. Yeah, Jalen nodded. Her name is Marlene. She looked terrified of him. If she's terrified, it means she knows things, Donovan said, closing the laptop. Travis, get the warrants drafted. Subpoena everything, bank records, phone logs, the works. I'm going to go have a cup of coffee at Rosie's Diner. The next morning, Oak Haven felt different. The air was thick with paranoia. When Donovan walked into Rosie's Diner, the breakfast rush hadn't started yet. Marlene was wiping down the counter, her shoulders slumped in exhaustion. When the bell jingled and she saw Donovan, a man in a sharp suit who clearly didn't belong, she froze. Donovan took a seat at the counter, right where Keller had stood the day before. He placed his FBI credentials softly on the formica. Marlene, Donovan said gently. My name is Donovan Reed. I'm Jalen's father, the boy from yesterday. Marlene let out a choked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked around frantically, terrified a deputy might be lurking in the shadows. Mister, you shouldn't be here. You don't know these people. They're dangerous. I know exactly what they are, Donovan said, keeping his voice low and comforting. and I know they've been bullying this town for years. I am here to tear them down, Marlene. But I need your help to do it." Marlene's eyes filled with tears. "He came by last night," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Keller. He came to my house after his shift. He told me that if anyone came asking about the city boy, I was to say the boy attacked him first. He said if I didn't back him up, he'd plant meth in my son's truck and lock him away for 10 years. A cold, lethal fury ignited in Donovan's chest. Witness intimidation. Extortion. Keller had just hammered the final nail into his own coffin. "Marlene," Donovan said, reaching out to gently touch her trembling hand, "I promise you, on my badge and on my son's life, Vance Keller will never wear a uniform again. But I need you to go on the record. Tell me everything." Marlene looked at the gold shield, then at Donovan's unwavering eyes. For the first time in years, a spark of hope pierced the suffocating fear of Oak Haven. She took a deep breath, wiped a tear from her cheek, and nodded. "Get your pen, Agent Reed. I've got a lot to say." Soon after, Jalen Reed was humiliated and physically assaulted in Rosie's diner. The fog rolling off the Georgia pines was unusually thick. It blanketed Oak Haven in a damp, heavy gray, muffling the sound of the approaching storm. But this storm didn't come from the sky. It came down Interstate 85 in a convoy of unmarked matte black Chevrolet Suburbans, accompanied by 2 armored Lenco Bearcats, bearing the unmistakable gold stenciled letters FBI. Special Agent Donovan Reed sat in the passenger seat of the lead SUV, his face carved from granite. He was dressed in full tactical gear, a Kevlar vest over his dress shirt, his badge prominently displayed on his chest. In the back seat sat Lauren Whitaker, a notoriously aggressive prosecutor from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, and Agent Travis Klein, who had spent sleepless nights turning Oak Haven's financial records into a federal indictment. "Warrants are signed by Federal Judge Theodore Langston," Whitaker said, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the vehicle. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the road ahead. "We have full authorization for a no-knock breach, seizure of all physical and digital assets, and the immediate arrest of Sheriff Raymond Collier and Deputy Vance Keller. Let's box them in. I want this precinct secured before they have time to hit a delete key." "Captain Monroe," Donovan spoke into his radio, addressing the FBI SWAT commander in the Bearcat behind them. "Execute Protocol Alpha. Lock down the perimeter. Nobody leaves. Nobody touches a computer." "Copy that, Agent Reed. Weapons tight, moving to breach." At precisely the appointed hour, the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department was violently awakened from its corrupt slumber. Deputy Vance Keller was standing by the coffee machine in the bullpen, laughing loudly at a joke told by his rookie partner, Riley Vaughn. Keller felt invincible. He had intimidated the waitress, Marlene, and the federal agent from Atlanta hadn't shown his face in days. Keller assumed Donovan Reed was just another angry father blowing hot air, too scared of local jurisdiction to actually do anything. Then the front doors of the precinct didn't just open, they were violently breached. A deafening crack echoed through the building as the reinforced glass doors were forced open by a tactical ram. Heavily armed FBI SWAT agents swarmed into the lobby like dark water, their rifles raised, red laser sights cutting through the stale air. "FBI, federal warrant, nobody move, hands in the air right now." The dispatcher, Darlene, screamed and dropped to the floor, covering her head. In the bullpen, the local deputies froze in absolute terror. The sheer overwhelming force of the federal government had just bypassed their front desk and surrounded them in seconds. "Hands off your weapons! Step away from the desks!" Captain Monroe roared, his tactical team seamlessly securing the room, stripping the local deputies of their sidearms and zip-tying their wrists. Keller's coffee mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the linoleum floor. The hot liquid splashed against his boots, but he didn't feel it. His pale blue eyes were wide with a primal, suffocating fear as he stared at the wall of federal agents. He instinctively reached toward his duty belt. "Don't even think about it, Keller." A cold, familiar voice echoed through the chaos. The sea of SWAT agents parted. Special Agent Donovan Reed stepped forward. He wasn't the father in the tailored suit anymore. He was the hammer of the United States Department of Justice. Keller's bravado completely evaporated. His hands shot up into the air, trembling violently. I didn't do anything," he stammered, backing away until his shoulders hit a filing cabinet. Donovan closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He grabbed Keller by the front of his uniform shirt, slamming him hard against the metal cabinet. The impact rattled the drawers. "Deputy Vance Keller?" Donovan said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly calm that was louder than any shout. "You are under arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, witness intimidation, extortion, and violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act." Donovan forcefully spun Keller around, kicking his legs apart, mirroring the exact physical dominance Keller had used on Jalen in the diner. Donovan unclipped Keller's handcuffs from his own duty belt. "Hands behind your back." When Keller hesitated, paralyzed by shock, Donovan grabbed his wrists and wrenched them backward, snapping the steel cuffs shut with a satisfying click. "You have the right to remain silent," Donovan whispered directly into Keller's ear as he patted him down, stripping him of his badge, his gun, and his taser. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a federal court of law. And trust me, Vance, I am going to use absolutely everything." Across the room, the frosted glass door to the sheriff's office was kicked open. Sheriff Raymond Collier was dragged out by 2 SWAT agents. He was half-dressed, his uniform shirt unbuttoned, his face a mask of purple, sputtering outrage. "This is an illegal occupation," Collier bellowed, struggling against the tactical agents. "I am the elected sheriff of this county. You have no jurisdiction here. I'll have all your badges for this." Lauren Whitaker stepped out from behind Donovan, clutching a thick manila folder. She adjusted her glasses, staring at Collier with absolute disgust. "Raymond Collier," Whitaker said crisply, her voice carrying across the silent, shell-shocked room. "I am Lauren Whitaker, DOJ Civil Rights Division. We have a 50-page federal indictment detailing your embezzlement, money laundering, and the illegal seizure of millions in civilian assets. We also just raided your brother-in-law, Philip Lang, at his shell corporation in Delaware. He folded in minutes and gave you up for a plea deal." Collier stopped struggling. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. His jaw worked silently, trying to find words that no longer existed. The empire he had built on intimidation and stolen money had just vaporized. "Search the premises," Donovan commanded Agent Klein. "I want every hard drive cloned, every filing cabinet emptied, and every ledger bagged. We take it all." The spectacle outside the precinct was something Oak Haven would talk about for generations. The fog had lifted, revealing a crowd of locals who had gathered at the perimeter tape and set up by the FBI. Marlene, the waitress from Rosie's diner, stood near the front of the crowd, clutching her coat around her. When she saw the precinct doors open, she held her breath. Sheriff Raymond Collier and Deputy Vance Keller were marched out into the cold morning light. They were not wearing their badges. They were wearing federal handcuffs, flanked by heavily armed agents, completely stripped of their power and dignity. Keller kept his head down, tears actively streaming down his face, the tough guy facade entirely broken. When Keller was shoved toward the back of a black SUV, his eyes briefly met Marlene through the crowd. She didn't look away. She didn't cower. She stood tall, a fierce, triumphant vindication in her eyes. The terror he had instilled in her was gone, replaced by the crushing reality of his own making. The karma was absolute. For years, Keller had put innocent people in the back of his cruiser, laughing as he ruined their lives. Now he was being stuffed into the back of a federal vehicle. His career was over, his freedom gone, facing decades in a maximum security federal penitentiary. Inside the FBI field office in Atlanta, the interrogation rooms were cold and windowless. Donovan Reed sat behind the two-way glass, watching as Lauren Whitaker and Agent Klein tag-teamed Raymond Collier. It took exactly 2 hours for the Brotherhood of the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department to cannibalize itself. I didn't know about the civil rights violations, Collier pleaded, his hands shackled to the metal table. He was sweating profusely, his arrogance entirely replaced by desperate self-preservation. Keller went rogue. He was a loose cannon. I tried to rein him in, I swear to God. The money, the forfeiture funds, Keller handled all the field seizures. I just signed the paperwork. In the adjacent interrogation room, Keller was singing a completely different tune. Collier ordered it, Keller sobbed, his voice cracking as he looked at Donovan, who had stepped into the room to watch him break. He gave us quotas. He said if we didn't bring in at least a certain amount a week in cash seizures, we'd lose our jobs. I just did what I was told. He took the money. He bought a vacation home in Florida. I can give you the address. Please, Agent Reed. I'll tell you everything. Just don't put me in general population. Donovan stared at the broken man in front of him. There was no pity in his heart, only a cold, profound satisfaction. You threatened to plant methamphetamine on a woman's son to cover up your assault on mine, Donovan said softly, leaning over the metal table. You abused the trust of the public. You used a badge to terrorize people because you thought you were untouchable. There are no deals for you, Vance. You are going to prison. And when you get there, you won't be a cop anymore. You'll just be an inmate in and out. Keller buried his face in his shackled hands, sobbing uncontrollably as the true weight of his actions finally crushed him. Later that evening, Donovan walked into Aunt Lena's house. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, the dark circles under his eyes prominent. But there was a lightness to his step that hadn't been there in days. Jalen was sitting on the couch, watching the local news. The headline flashed across the bottom of the screen. Massive corruption ring busted in Oak Haven. Sheriff and deputies facing federal RICO charges. Footage of Keller and Collier being led away in handcuffs looped on the screen. Donovan sat down heavily next to his son, letting out a long sigh. He reached over and pulled Jalen into a one-armed hug. "It's over," Donovan said quietly. "They're gone. The whole department is being placed under federal receivership. Whitaker is going back through years of arrest records to overturn every false conviction Keller touched. They're going to try and return the stolen money." Jalen leaned his head against his father's shoulder, watching the screen. He thought about the terror he had felt in the diner, the feeling of absolute powerlessness when a man with a gun and a badge decided to make him a target. And then he looked at his father, the man who had torn down a corrupt empire to protect him. "Dad?" Jalen asked softly. "Yeah, Jay? I think I'm going to change my major. Pre-law. I want to be a civil rights attorney." Donovan smiled, a deep, resonant pride swelling in his chest. "I think that's a brilliant idea, son. The wheels of federal justice grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine." After the trial, the sprawling federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta became the final battleground. The media circus surrounding the trial was relentless. The case of United States versus Raymond Collier et al. Had captured national attention, echoing the tragic real-life abuses of civil asset forfeiture seen in towns across the country. But this time the victims had the full, unbridled wrath of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division standing in their corner. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was thick with tension, filtered through the hum of heavy air conditioning and the scratching of courtroom sketch artists' pencils. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Vance, a federal judge known for her zero-tolerance policy toward public corruption, presided over the proceedings with a stern, unflinching gaze. Lauren Whitaker, the lead prosecutor, dismantled the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department piece by piece. She didn't just rely on the financial ledgers agent Travis Klein had meticulously decoded. She brought the human cost of Collier and Keller's greed into the light. Over the course of the trial, a parade of Oak Haven citizens and out-of-state travelers took the stand. They were the ghosts of Keller's past, the people he thought were too poor, too frightened, or too disconnected to fight back. There was Kayla Thompson, a 24-year-old single mother, who wept on the stand as she recounted how Keller had pulled her over for following too closely. He had seized $3,000 in cash, money she had saved from double shifts at a nursing home to pay her overdue rent, claiming a drug dog had hit on her glove box. No drugs were ever found, but the money was kept. There was Reverend Elijah Grant, a soft-spoken 60-year-old pastor, who testified that Keller had thrown him against the hood of his cruiser during a traffic stop, dislocating his shoulder before seizing church donation funds from his trunk. And then there was Marlene, the waitress from Rosie's Diner, who walked to the witness stand with her head held high. She looked directly at Vance Keller, who sat at the defense table in a drab, ill-fitting suit, looking years older and far lighter in spirit. Marlene detailed the night Keller came to her home, threatening to plant methamphetamine on her teenage son if she didn't lie to the FBI. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. The jury's faces hardened into stone. When Special Agent Donovan Reed took the stand, the courtroom fell utterly silent. Donovan didn't display anger. He displayed absolute, devastating competence. He walked the jury through the events at Rosie's Diner, breaking down the specific constitutional violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. He testified about the illegal detention, the physical battery, and the clear, undeniable abuse of power. Sitting in the front row of the gallery was Jalen Reed. He was 18 now, wearing a sharp, tailored suit, looking every bit the future attorney he had promised to become. When his father detailed the assault, Jalen didn't flinch. He kept his eyes locked on Keller. For a brief, agonizing second, Keller looked back at the boy he had tried to break. Keller was the one who looked away, his eyes dropping to the mahogany table, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his own karma. The defense attorney, a high-priced Atlanta lawyer paid for by the remnants of the local police union, tried to paint Keller as a pawn, a dedicated, albeit aggressive deputy who was just following the illegal quotas set by Sheriff Collier. Judge Vance wasn't having it. When the jury returned after deliberation, the verdict was a foregone conclusion. Guilty on all counts: racketeering, wire fraud, deprivation of civil rights, witness intimidation, and extortion. The sentencing hearing was a masterclass in poetic justice. Federal law allows the government to seize assets purchased with the proceeds of criminal activity. The very weapon Collier and Keller had used to destroy lives was turned entirely against them. Keller stood before the judge, weeping openly, begging for leniency for the sake of his family. But his family was already gone. His wife had filed for divorce the week the indictment dropped, taking their children and moving out of state to escape the sheer public humiliation. "Mr. Keller," Judge Vance said, her voice echoing through the cavernous room, "you wore a badge, not a blindfold. You took an oath to protect the public, and instead you hunted them. You treated the citizens of your county and those simply passing through as walking ATMs to fund your department's bloated budget and your personal greed. You relied on the fear inherent in your uniform to silence your victims." She adjusted her glasses, looking down at the broken man. "You used civil asset forfeiture to steal millions. Therefore, it is the order of this court that the United States Marshal Service seize your personal assets, including your home, your Ford F-250, your fishing boat, and the entirety of your state pension. Those assets will be liquidated and placed into a victim restitution fund." Keller let out a ragged sob, his knees buckling slightly as the reality hit him. He was completely bankrupt. "Furthermore," Judge Vance continued, her tone unyielding, "for the terror you inflicted upon your community, I sentence you to 12 years in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. You will serve this time at United States Penitentiary, Atlanta. Sheriff Collier, as the architect of this enterprise, you are sentenced to 15 years. There is no parole in the federal system." They would serve every single day as the bailiffs clamped the heavy steel handcuffs around Keller's wrists, leading him away to a life where he would be surrounded by the very types of people he used to illegally incarcerate. Donovan Reed stood in the gallery and buttoned his suit jacket. The debt was paid in full. The aftermath in Oak Haven was a painful but necessary rebirth. The DOJ mandated the complete dissolution of the Oak Haven Sheriff's Department. Law enforcement duties were temporarily handed over to the Georgia State Patrol, while the town established a new, heavily monitored municipal police force with a civilian oversight board. The Victim Restitution Fund, fueled by the seized millions and the liquidated assets of the corrupt officers, began mailing checks. Kayla Thompson got her $3,000 back, plus interest and damages. Reverend Grant's church roof was repaired, and Marlene, with a small business grant backed by the restitution fund, bought Rosie's diner from the aging owner. The first thing she did was rip out the old booths and install a plaque near the front door that read, "Everyone is welcome. No bullies allowed." Later, on a bright May day in Washington, D.C., Donovan Reed stood on the lush green lawn of Georgetown University. The cherry blossoms had just finished blooming. He held a sleek leather briefcase in his hands. Jalen walked toward him, holding a thick stack of textbooks, laughing with a group of friends. When he saw his father, his face lit up. He jogged over, dropping his bag to give Donovan a tight embrace. "Dad, you made it. I wouldn't miss the end of your freshman year, Jay." Donovan smiled, stepping back to look at his son. Jalen was thriving. The shadow of Oak Haven was gone, replaced by a fierce, driving purpose. "How were finals?" "Crushed them," Jalen grinned. "Aced constitutional law." The professor actually used the United States versus Collier case as a module on the RICO Act and color of law violations. "Is that right?" Donovan chuckled, feeling a deep, resonating warmth in his chest. "I hope you corrected him if he got any of the details wrong." "I might have chimed in once or twice," Jalen admitted, his eyes sparkling. Donovan held out the leather briefcase. "I got you something. A little early for law school, I know, but I figured you could use it for your summer internship at the Civil Rights Division." Jalen took the briefcase, running his hand over the smooth, dark leather. Embossed in small gold letters near the handle were the words, "Jalen Reed, Esquire." He looked up at his father, his eyes shining with profound gratitude and determination. They had faced the worst of what authority could become: the arrogance, the cruelty, the unchecked power. But they had also proven that the law, when wielded by those with unwavering integrity, was the greatest equalizer on earth. The bully in the diner had tried to make Jalen feel small and powerless. Instead, he had inadvertently forged a young man who would spend the rest of his life ensuring no one else would ever feel that way again. Wow, what a massive reality check for a bully with a badge. Deputy Keller thought he was the untouchable king of Oak Haven, but he learned the hard way that nobody is above the law, especially when you mess with an FBI agent's family. From throwing a teenager out of a diner to losing his badge, his assets, and his freedom, this is the ultimate definition of hard karma hitting back. It just goes to show that corruption thrives in silence, but it crumbles the second someone is brave enough to stand up and speak out. If you loved watching this arrogant cop get a masterclass in federal justice, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life karma stories, and share this video with someone who loves a satisfying ending. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Jalen's shoes at that diner? Let us know.